Hey, throwaway account for obvious reasons. This story isn't about me directly, but I still feel like I got punched in the gut when I heard it because it happened to my mom. And no matter how old you get, hearing something like this about your own mother messes with your head. It also made me realize how easily trust can be weaponized even by a complete stranger. She's a project manager for a logistics company and travels a lot for work, nothing too glamorous, mostly long flights, long meetings, and long evenings alone in hotel rooms with whatever's on TV. She's used to chatting with people on flights, keeping it polite, professional. This particular trip was no different, until it was. She was flying out to Kansas City for a 4-day conference. Nothing out of the ordinary. She boarded, got her aisle seat, settled in with her Kindle. And then this guy, well-dressed, clean-cut, probably mid-40s, sat down next to her and struck up conversation. He said he was in business consulting. They talked about work, mutual cities they'd both visited, even some books. Harmless small talk. Or so it seemed. They exchanged business cards before they landed. Totally normal, right? It's not like that's weird. It's kind of what you do when you're a professional on the road. You never know who you might work with again. But what happened next was definitely not normal. Not even close. So fast forward a few hours. My mom checks into her hotel, one of those mid-range business traveler spots, clean, quiet, nothing fancy. She gets to her room, orders room service, because she was too tired to go out, and throws on the hotel robe while flipping through channels. It's just after 9:30 p.m. when the room phone rings. Now, she's thinking maybe it's someone from the conference or a front desk check-in call. Totally routine. But when she picks up, the receptionist says, "Hi, ma'am. Your husband is here in the lobby. He says he left his key upstairs. Would you like us to send him up or would you prefer to come down?" My mom freezes. Her husband, my dad, is not in Kansas City. He's at home. 700 miles away. He had kissed her goodbye that morning at 5 a.m. She stares at the receiver like it just grew teeth. She keeps it together and calmly says, "I think you're mistaken. My husband isn't traveling with me." There's a pause. "Receptionist, he said he flew with you this morning. Said you were sitting together on the plane." That's when it clicks, the guy from the flight. Business consulting guy. He wasn't just making friendly conversation. He was tracking her. He remembered where she said she was staying. He followed her from the airport. And now, he was trying to fake being her husband to get access to her room. That's when the fear kicked in. My mom told me later she felt like the air had just left the room. She stood there in the hotel robe, heart pounding, hands still gripping the receiver like it was the only thing keeping her tethered to reality. There's something especially sickening about the moment you realize someone's been planning to deceive you while smiling in your face just hours earlier. She asked the receptionist to not give him a key, obviously. Said she didn't know who he was and told them to call security immediately. The receptionist, to her credit, didn't argue. She got quiet real fast and said someone would handle it. Then my mom hung up and locked every single lock on the hotel door. Deadbolt. Chain. One of those weird metal bars that folds into the frame like a barricade. And she just stood there. Shaking. She didn't cry. Not yet. She said it was like her brain was trying to go into problem-solving mode, but her body wouldn't cooperate. Like every instinct was screaming run, but there was nowhere to run to. She peeked out the peephole after a few minutes and didn't see anything. No one in the hallway. No knocking. No weird noises. Just silence. Which somehow made it worse. She called the front desk again and asked if the man was still down there. The receptionist told her he had already left. He didn't argue. Didn't cause a scene. Just walked out. And that made her stomach twist even more, because it meant he wasn't just some drunk idiot or creep acting on impulse. It meant he had a plan. So after she triple-locked the door and turned every light on in the room, my mom sat on the edge of the bed and just stared at her purse. That's where the business card was, the one he'd given her on the plane. And now, the card felt like a threat. Like it was buzzing with all the red flags she'd ignored. She pulled it out and looked at it again, trying to remember exactly what he said his name was. It looked legit. Clean design. Standard corporate font. Logo of a consulting firm she'd never heard of, Straightest-Point Global or something like that. She grabbed her laptop, started Googling. And this is where things got weird. There was a website for Straightest-Point Global. It looked professional enough, at first glance. But the About page didn't load. The team bios were just stock photos. The contact email bounced back when she tried it. And when she plugged the phone number on the card into a reverse search? Burner. No results. No listings. No ties to any business. The guy had made a fake company website. A fake identity. Even the business card was a prop. My mom is not easily rattled, she's worked in logistics during some seriously chaotic situations, but this? This shook her. She realized then, this man had chosen her before the plane even landed. At this point, my mom was done feeling scared, she was pissed. The fear switched into something sharper. She'd been targeted, manipulated, and nearly violated. And she wasn't about to just sit with that. So first thing the next morning, she went straight to the hotel manager. She laid it all out, the fake husband story, the attempted key access, the fake business card, the website. She gave them the card and asked if they had security footage. They did. And yeah, there he was. Clear as day. Same guy from the flight, walking into the lobby like he belonged there. He even smiled at the front desk staff like he was checking in. They pulled the footage of him talking to the receptionist and confirmed the time, about 9:15 p.m. She had checked in at 8:20. Which means he'd probably followed her from the airport or hung around the lobby, waiting for the right time to move. The hotel took it seriously. They offered to move her to another room on a different floor under a different name, and they contacted their security provider to flag the guy's image. Then she called the police. The officer she spoke to was polite but didn't exactly radiate urgency. They took the report, told her they'd look into it, and gave her a case number. But no promises. Because technically, the guy hadn't broken any laws. Not yet. He hadn't gotten into her room. He hadn't touched her. He hadn't done anything that could stick as a charge. Just a very creepy, very intentional lie. And apparently, that's not illegal. Which, yeah. That's when she finally cried. I didn't find out until she got back home. She sat me down like she was about to tell me someone died. At first, I thought something had happened to my dad, or maybe she was sick. But then she started from the beginning, the plane, the fake business card, the phone call from the hotel. I was stunned. Like, hands clenched, jaw tight, how close did this guy get? Kind of stunned. I could see it on her face while she told me how she was trying to stay strong, how she didn't want me to panic. But she was still carrying it. That weird, invisible weight. Like her reality had been warped by this one 45-minute conversation on a plane. I asked if she was okay, and she just nodded. Said she wasn't scared anymore, just disgusted. Disgusted that someone could fake charm, fake professionalism, fake connection, just to get close to someone vulnerable. Disgusted that the system couldn't do anything about it. And disgusted with herself, a little, for not catching on earlier. She kept saying, I should have known. I should have seen it. But she couldn't have. Because this guy knew what he was doing. He didn't cross the line too soon. He smiled the right amount. Asked polite questions. Gave just enough information to feel real without offering anything that could be verified. He had studied how to not seem like a threat. And that's what made it worse, he didn't come across like a monster. He came across like a gentleman. After she told me everything, I remember just sitting there, stunned, not just at what happened, but at how deeply she blamed herself. Like somehow she was responsible for being too polite. Too trusting. Too normal on a plane. She said, maybe I shouldn't have told him what hotel I was staying at. But come on, you're on a work trip, making small talk, and someone casually asks where you're staying? That's not weird. That's what people do on flights. Especially when they're pretending to be professional peers. She kept replaying things in her head, what she said, how she smiled, if she gave him the wrong impression. It honestly pissed me off. Not at her, but at the way the world trains women, even smart, independent ones, to think they did something wrong just by existing in someone else's scope of manipulation. I told her straight, you didn't do anything wrong. You didn't invite that guy? He's a predator. You were just on a plane. She gave me this tight smile and said, thanks, baby. I know. I just can't shake it. And that's when it really hit me. This wasn't just a creepy story about a hotel incident. It was a violation. A psychological ambush. He invaded her personal space, her sense of security, and her identity by pretending to be her husband. She said the word husband had never sounded so disgusting. So get this, the incident didn't just mess with her emotionally. It followed her into work, too. She reported everything to her company's travel coordinator, just in case the guy had somehow gotten access to her itinerary. She wasn't being paranoid, she was being smart. She wanted them to flag it, tighten protocols, maybe even adjust how travel bookings were handled going forward. And what did she get? A half-hearted thanks, we'll look into it, followed by awkward silence and a very clear don't make a fuss vibe. She wasn't expecting a hero's welcome, but she was expecting someone to take her seriously. Instead, she got corporate indifference wrapped in fake concern. Like they didn't want the liability of acknowledging the situation fully. She even asked if she could start booking under a preferred alias or initials for safety, and the response was, that's not standard policy. Standard policy. She's been with this company for 9 years. She's led major operations, managed teams, handled chaos in multiple countries, and they couldn't be bothered to help her feel safe in a damn hotel. It gutted her. She said, I gave them everything, and when I needed just a little bit of protection, they shrugged. That's when she started thinking seriously about leaving. Because if your employer treats your trauma like an inconvenience, that's not a job, that's a hostage situation with benefits. Now, if you know my mom, you know she doesn't just let things go. Especially when someone tries to play her. So a few days after she got home, once the adrenaline had faded and the shock turned into focus, she started digging. Not obsessively, methodically. Like a bloodhound in heels. She started with the fake company, Stratus Point Global. She did a full Hoist search on the domain. Registered 3 months ago. The listed contact? A Privacy Shield service in Nevada. Total dead end. Then she reverse image searched some of the stock photos on the website. 2 of them were lifted from an HR consultancy blog in Canada. One was from a Spanish-language leadership article. Every part of the site was a Frankenstein of stolen content and business buzzwords. She took it further, looked up burner number databases, checked forums, even contacted a friend in cybersecurity. And here's the kicker. This guy wasn't a one-off. There were similar stories, different cities, different women, but the same general pattern. Plane rides. Fake business personas. Professional charm. And each time, he'd try to push boundaries just far enough. She didn't find a name. No arrest record. But she found digital footprints. Forum threads where other women were saying, this happened to me. I didn't think anyone would believe me. She printed them. Highlighted the similarities. Compiled it all into a folder. She brought it to the police department herself, walked right in like she was delivering a brief to a boardroom. And this time, they paid attention. So at this point, the cops finally realized this wasn't just one weird encounter, this was a pattern. A serial scam, or worse, something predatory that hadn't escalated yet, but could. The officer assigned to her case took her documentation and said something like, I don't think we're dealing with a typical con artist here. This feels rehearsed. Intentional. Yeah. No kidding. He forwarded the file to a detective in a different division, someone who dealt with cyber fraud and stalking. They said they'd cross-reference her report with other similar incidents, especially ones tied to airport hotels and burner numbers. It wasn't much, but it was movement. And then something even more unexpected happened. She got a call from a woman. This woman found my mom's contact info because she'd posted in a private forum for women in tech a post warning others to be cautious about sharing hotel details while traveling. The woman said, "I think I met the same man. Or at least, someone using the same playbook. Different city. Different flight. But same approach, smooth businessman, same type of fake consulting firm, same quiet persistence." In her case, he tried to get her to meet for drinks at the hotel bar. She declined. He pushed. She ghosted. That woman never reported it because nothing happened. But now, something had. My mom started making a list of every woman who reached out. She kept hearing the same phrase, "I thought I was just overreacting." And that made her furious. Because women aren't overreacting. They're surviving quietly while the world minimizes their instincts. It was about 2 weeks after my mom started connecting the dots when she got the call. The detective on her case, the one who'd started cross-referencing the incidents, called her, and for the first time, there was actual urgency in his voice. "We've been tracking similar reports across multiple states, and we believe this individual is using a variety of fake identities. Some of the names tie back to people who've been involved in low-level cons. But there's a pattern we can't ignore." Turns out, the guy my mom had encountered was part of a larger network of scammers. They used the same method over and over: find women on business trips, establish trust through small talk, and then either scam or manipulate them in a way that left them questioning their own instincts. What they found was disturbing. This wasn't just a creep trying to get into hotel rooms. This was a coordinated effort, a ring of people who targeted frequent travelers, people who wouldn't easily make a scene. They preyed on the idea that women alone in business settings wouldn't make a fuss. They counted on the discomfort of confronting this type of behavior. They had almost no criminal history, no arrest records, but they had a system down: fake personas, false companies, burner phones, and a string of similar encounters scattered across the country. But here's where it gets wild. They'd been targeting her, yes. But she wasn't the only woman he'd been stalking. He'd been doing this for years, just enough to stay under the radar, moving from city to city, always acting like a professional businessman, always getting the same amount of distance before his victims started getting too uncomfortable. Now, they were closing in. A few weeks later, the breakthrough finally came. The detective managed to get a solid lead on the guy's true identity. It turns out he wasn't just some freelance businessman bouncing between airports and hotels. He had been operating under a false identity for years. His real name was something totally different, and the trail led them straight to a man with a history of petty fraud and identity theft. But here's the kicker: this guy had managed to stay just above the radar. He wasn't dangerous in the sense that he was physically violent, but he was a manipulator. And a master at staying within the lines of what was acceptable. He knew how to blend into business environments and deflect suspicion. When they finally tracked him down, the authorities were able to connect him to multiple aliases, one of which had been used to book a series of flights with women in the same business circles. He was smooth, deliberate, and calculating, but what shook my mom the most was the fact that when they found him, he was living a completely normal life, under a completely different name. No criminal charges had been filed against him, despite the fact that he'd been running this scam for so long. She couldn't believe it. He wasn't some wild-eyed creep hiding in dark corners. He was a well-spoken, well-dressed man who could have easily passed as a corporate consultant. It made her feel sick all over again. How many other people had he gotten close to, just by being charming and calculating? But at least now, they had his real name. They were going to pursue it. When the police finally found him, my mom had this weird mix of relief and disgust. Relief that they were going after him, disgust at how close he'd come to ruining her sense of safety and trust. She wasn't naive, she knew there were predators out there. But she'd never thought she'd be one of them. The authorities charged him with a series of offenses related to identity theft, fraud, and harassment, but it wasn't like they could charge him for everything. The psychological toll? The fear? That was something that didn't show up on a police report. It didn't make the headlines. But for her, it was the hardest part to carry. When he was arrested, she didn't feel a sense of victory. It wasn't like she'd won anything. She still had to live with the fact that someone had tried to break into her life, someone who knew just how to push the right buttons. She had the closure of knowing he wouldn't be able to do it again, but that didn't erase the lingering feeling of vulnerability. There was no magic fix for that. She ended up leaving the company a few months later. She just couldn't shake the feeling that everything she'd built with them had been tainted. When you trust someone to protect you, and they don't, it leaves a scar. It took a long time before she could feel like herself again. She switched companies, started fresh, but it wasn't easy. She'd have moments where she'd look at her travel itinerary and second-guess every detail. Every time she went to a hotel, she had to do a mental checklist to make sure she wasn't giving out personal details too freely. But she didn't stop traveling. She didn't stop doing what she loved. She just did it more aware. Looking back, my mom learned a lot. Maybe more than she ever wanted to. The biggest lesson? Trust your instincts. She's always been the type of person who trusts others. Hell, she has to for her job. But this taught her to question who she trusts, and how much she shares. She used to think, I'm a professional. I can handle small talk. I can be friendly without it being a big deal. Now, she sees it differently. There's a line. And when it comes to interactions with strangers, she's learned that line can be blurry. It's hard to tell when someone is just making conversation, or when they're carefully measuring your vulnerabilities. The trick, she says now, is learning how to set boundaries without second-guessing yourself. She also learned that silence doesn't always mean everything's okay. When people brush off their own discomfort or brush off warnings, that silence can be dangerous. For a long time, she was silent, too. She didn't speak up because she didn't want to seem paranoid or rude. But she should have spoken up sooner. What really got to her, though, was the realization that the world is full of people who prey on kindness, people who use your trust to get what they want. And that's the hardest part. Because we want to believe that everyone is as decent as we are, but that's not always the case. And lastly, she said that moving on wasn't as easy as getting over it. You don't just forget the ways you've been manipulated. You learn to live with it and grow stronger from it. It doesn't make you weak, it makes you more aware of the world around you. After everything, my mom said something to me that stuck. She said, if there's one thing I've learned from all this, it's that you can't let anyone else define what your safety looks like. It's your job to protect it, even if it means being a little uncomfortable or standing up when it feels weird. She's right, and I think we all forget that sometimes. We're taught to be polite, to make other people feel comfortable even when they might be the ones putting us in uncomfortable situations. But we don't owe anyone that. We owe ourselves the peace of mind that comes with knowing our boundaries are respected. So here's my advice, and it's not just for women, it's for anyone, really. If something feels off, don't brush it off. Trust your gut. And if you feel like you've been manipulated, like your instincts are being played, speak up. Don't keep it quiet. Don't let someone else's charm or professionalism make you doubt what you know is true. And if you find yourself in a situation like my mom's, where someone crosses a line, remember this, you're not crazy. You're not overreacting. You're just protecting yourself. You have every right to feel safe, and you should never apologize for doing whatever you need to do to maintain that safety. The world might not always have your back, but you have to have your own. And sometimes, that means calling out the bullshit when you see it, even if it's in the form of a perfectly polished business card and a smooth talker on a plane.